Story number 1. Shadows at Midnight Fuel. I've always appreciated the quiet solitude that comes with working the night shift. The world slows down, the chaos of the day giving way to the hushed whispers of the night. My job at the Silver Star gas station in rural Victoria, Australia, suited me perfectly. The vast expanse of open land, the endless sky, and the occasional passing truck were my companions during those lonely hours. But on one fateful night in July 2019, the serenity I cherished was shattered by an encounter that would haunt me long after the dawn broke. It was nearing 3 a.m., the witching hour when the veil between the ordinary and the supernatural feels thinnest. The air was crisp, the silence punctuated only by the distant howling of a lone dog and the steady hum of the refrigeration units. I was tidying up the store, stacking shelves and cleaning the counters, when I glanced out the window and saw him, a man dressed in a long, black coat, pacing slowly around the perimeter of the gas station. At first, I thought he might be a stranded motorist, a lost traveler seeking assistance. But there was something unsettling about his demeanor, an almost spectral quality that made my skin crawl. His movements were deliberate, almost hypnotic, as he circled the station with an intent that seemed too focused for a mere passerby. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, the cold night air biting at my cheeks. The man was still there, his back to me, staring intently at something I couldn't discern. "Hello," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady despite the unease gnawing at me. He didn't respond. Instead, he continued his slow, methodical walk around the station, his silhouette merging with the shadows cast by the flickering streetlights. I approached him cautiously, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Is everything all right? Do you need any help?" As I drew nearer, the man suddenly stopped, turning his head to face me. For a moment, our eyes met. His were hollow, devoid of any warmth or recognition. Before I could utter another word, he vanished, dissolving into thin air as if swallowed by the night itself. Heart pounding, I stood there for a few seconds, trying to process what had just happened. I glanced around, expecting to see someone hiding or perhaps an illusion caused by the dim lighting and my overactive imagination. But there was no one else in sight, just the empty expanse of the gas station and the vast, indifferent countryside stretching out in all directions. Shaken, I decided to check the security cameras, a standard procedure for any unusual activity. Back inside the store, I booted up the monitor, my hands trembling slightly as I navigated to the footage from the past hour. Rewinding to the exact moment I saw the man, I watched in disbelief as the figure appeared on the screen, pacing around the station. I pressed pause just as he turned to face the camera. And then nothing. The screen went blank, as if the footage had been tampered with or corrupted in some inexplicable way. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I called over to my colleague, Jake, who was manning the front counter. "Jake, you need to see this," I said, my voice tight with tension. He walked over, glancing at the monitor before looking back at me with concern. "What's going on?" I played the footage again, pointing out the moment the man vanished. Jake frowned, leaning in closer to the screen. "That's odd. There's no record of him entering or leaving. And why did the footage cut out?" Before we could ponder further, another call came in. The intercom crackled to life, a faint, distorted voice breaking through the static. "Help me! Help me!" Both of us froze, exchanging uneasy glances. The voice was faint, barely audible over the ambient noise of the night, but unmistakably human. "What's going on?" Jake asked, his skepticism wavering. I shook my head, my mind racing. "I don't know, but we need to check it out." We grabbed our flashlights and made our way back outside, the cold biting at our skin as we ventured towards the source of the call. The voice seemed to be emanating from the back of the gas station, near the storage area where we kept extra supplies and maintenance equipment. As we approached, the air grew colder, the silence heavy with anticipation. "Hello? Is someone there?" I called out again, my voice echoing in the stillness. There was no response, only the faint sound of the wind rustling through the trees. Suddenly, Jake stopped in his tracks, pointing towards the old storage shed. "Look," he whispered, his eyes wide with fear. There, standing at the entrance of the shed, was the same man in the black coat. His presence was almost ethereal, his form blending seamlessly with the shadows. He didn't move, didn't respond to our calls, just stood there, staring into the abyss. I stepped forward, heart pounding in my chest. "Can we help you? What do you need?" He remained silent, his gaze never wavering. For a moment, I felt a surge of sadness emanating from him, a deep, unspoken pain that tugged at my soul. Then, without warning, he vanished once more, leaving us standing in the cold night air, the sound of our own breathing the only thing breaking the silence. We stood there for a moment, processing the inexplicable encounter. Jake finally broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to call the police. This isn't normal." I nodded, pulling out my phone to dial for assistance. As I did, I glanced back towards the shed, half expecting to see him again. But there was nothing, just the empty, foreboding structure standing against the night sky. The police arrived shortly after, setting up their equipment and interviewing us about the strange occurrences. As they reviewed the footage, they too were baffled by the unexplained phenomena. No signs of forced entry, no footprints leading to or from the shed, and the missing footage only added to the mystery. Over the next few weeks, the disturbances continued. The man in black appeared sporadically, each time vanishing without a trace. The whispers grew louder, more desperate, echoing through the night and seeping into our dreams. The local community began to murmur about the haunted gas station, sharing stories of lost souls and restless spirits that wandered the countryside. Determined to find answers, I delved into the history of the area, uncovering a tragic tale from decades past. The land where our gas station stood had once been the site of a devastating accident. A young man named Daniel Clark had lost his life in a terrible storm while tending to the farm nearby. His family never recovered from the loss, and rumors of his spirit lingering in the area had persisted ever since. Armed with this knowledge, I felt a connection between the spectral figure and Daniel Clark. His restless spirit seemed trapped, unable to find peace amidst the storms that had claimed his life. I decided to perform a ritual of remembrance, hoping to honor his memory and perhaps free his soul from its eternal torment. One stormy night, as lightning illuminated the sky and rain pelted against the windows, I gathered candles, a photograph of Daniel provided by his family, and a few personal items that I believed would resonate with his spirit. Jake joined me, bringing a sense of support and camaraderie that bolstered my resolve. We approached the shed, now eerily quiet despite the raging storm. Lighting the candles around the perimeter, we placed the photograph and personal items inside, forming a circle of light that contrasted starkly against the darkness. "Daniel," I began, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "We're here to honor your memory and help you find peace." As I spoke, the temperature in the shed dropped sharply, the air thick with an unspoken presence. The whispers began again, this time clearer and more poignant. "Thank you, thank you." The spectral figure appeared once more, standing at the center of the circle. His red eyes met mine, and for a moment, there was a glimmer of recognition, a flicker of gratitude that softened his haunted expression. Slowly, he began to fade, the oppressive energy lifting as his form dissolved into the stormy night. Tears welled up in my eyes as I watched his spirit find the peace it had long been denied. The storm outside began to calm, the rain easing into a gentle drizzle that mirrored the tranquility settling over the shed. Jake placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, and together, we felt the weight of the past lifting from our shoulders. In the days that followed, the disturbances ceased entirely. The man in black no longer appeared, and the whispers faded into the night, replaced by a serene stillness that brought much-needed peace to the gas station. The local community found solace in knowing that Daniel Clark's spirit had been honored and released. The haunted gas station no longer a place of fear, but a reminder of the enduring power of compassion and remembrance. Reflecting on those harrowing nights, I realized that some spirits linger not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to be remembered and understood. Daniel's restless presence had been a plea for recognition, a silent cry for help that we were fortunate enough to hear and respond to with empathy and respect. Years have passed since that transformative night, but the memory of the shadows at Midnight Fuel remains vivid in my mind. The Silver Star gas station stands as a beacon of light and safety, its once haunted halls now free from the tormented echoes of the past. And sometimes, when the night is particularly still and the wind whispers through the trees, I catch a faint echo of a grateful whisper, a reminder that some spirits never truly leave, their stories forever intertwined with the lives of those who dare to listen. Story number 2. Echoes among the pages. I've always found solace within the walls of the Oxfordshire Public Library. As a night shift librarian, the silence of the building wrapped around me like a comforting blanket. The rows of books my steadfast companions in the darkness. The grand, old structure stood proudly on the outskirts of town, its Gothic architecture a testament to a bygone era. Yet, beneath its serene exterior, the library held secrets that whispered through its halls, secrets that only the night dared to unveil. It was a bitterly cold December night in 2018 when the unease began to settle in. The wind howled outside, rattling the stained glass windows and sending shivers down my spine. I was shelving returned books in the second-floor storage room, a cavernous space filled with dusty tomes and forgotten manuscripts. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows that danced along the shelves. I often heard noises during my shifts, creaks and groans of the old building settling, the occasional scurrying of nocturnal pests. But that night, the sounds were different. Soft, deliberate footsteps echoed from the hallway above, a steady rhythm that seemed too human to dismiss. I paused, listening intently, trying to pinpoint the source. The footsteps stopped as abruptly as they had begun, leaving behind an oppressive silence. Shaking off the chill, I returned to my task, unaware that my perception of the library was about to be forever altered. As the clock struck 2 a.m., a sudden knock echoed through the storage room door, startling me. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached the door cautiously, flashlight in hand. "Hello? Is someone there?" I called out, my voice wavering slightly. There was no response, only the persistent drip of condensation from the pipes above. I glanced around, the room seemingly empty, yet an undeniable presence lingered in the air. Shrugging off the unease, I decided to ignore it and continue shelving books. But the knocking persisted, growing louder and more insistent, reverberating through the stone walls. Summoning my courage, I opened the door to the storage room, expecting to find a fellow employee or perhaps a lost visitor. Instead, the hallway was empty, the corridor bathed in the dim glow of the overhead lights. Puzzled, I stepped outside, the cold air nipping at my skin. As I turned to close the door, a sudden gust of wind slammed it shut behind me, the sound echoing ominously through the corridor. Heart racing, I hurried back into the storage room, only to find the shelves in disarray. Books lay scattered across the floor, pages torn and titles defaced. My breath caught in my throat as I realized that something, or someone, had been in there before I could react. A heavy thud reverberated from the corner of the room, followed by the unmistakable sound of books crashing to the ground. I spun around, flashlight beam sweeping the room, but no one was there. The oppressive silence returned, broken only by my ragged breathing. Trembling, I reached for my phone to call for help, but the battery was dead, a nightmare scenario for someone working alone. Panic surged through me as I backed away, tripping over a fallen book and sprawling onto the cold, hard floor. When morning light finally seeped through the stained glass windows, I found myself shaken but unharmed. The library was bustling with the usual daytime activity, the eerie events of the night seemingly erased by the dawn. I recounted the experience to my colleague, Sarah, who listened with a mixture of skepticism and concern. You know, there have been rumors about this place, Sarah began, her voice cautious. They say room 309 has a history, something tragic that happened years ago. Most people just ignore it. But I guess tonight proved there might be something to those stories. Intrigued and disturbed, I decided to dig deeper. The library's archives were a treasure trove of forgotten histories, and I pored over old newspaper clippings and staff records. What I discovered was a heartbreaking tale of a young librarian named Emma Thompson, who had worked the night shift nearly 2 decades earlier. Emma was beloved by everyone who knew her, known for her dedication and kind spirit. But one winter night, during a particularly severe storm, Emma never returned from her shift. Search parties scoured the library, but Emma was never found. The official cause of her disappearance was listed as an accidental fall down the stairwell, but whispers of foul play and supernatural involvement persisted among the staff. Some believed Emma's spirit was trapped within the library, her sorrow and confusion manifesting as the disturbances I had experienced. Determined to uncover the truth and perhaps put Emma's spirit to rest, I sought out Sarah's help. Together, we delved into the mystery, interviewing longtime employees and piecing together the fragmented history of room 309. The more we learned, the clearer it became that Emma's story was one of unresolved pain and lingering anguish. One night, armed with candles, a notebook of our findings, and a deep sense of empathy, we decided to confront the haunting presence. We set up in the storage room, the same place where the chaos had erupted months before. The air was thick with anticipation as we lit the candles, their flickering flames casting a warm glow that contrasted with the cold, oppressive atmosphere. "Emma," I called out softly, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. "We know what happened. We're here to help you find peace." The room seemed to respond, the temperature dropping as a soft, sorrowful whisper filled the air. "Help me find me." The words echoed around us, a plea that resonated deep within my soul. The shadows in the corners of the room began to stir, coalescing into a faint, translucent form, a young woman in a vintage librarian's uniform. Her eyes filled with a profound sadness. Tears welled in my eyes as I reached out, not with fear, but with compassion. "Emma, we're sorry you had to go through that. We want to help you remember and move on." The apparition's gaze softened, a flicker of hope replacing the sorrow. She began to move toward us, her form becoming more defined as if drawing strength from our acknowledgement. "Find my locket. It holds my memories," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackling of the candles. Understanding dawned on me. We needed to find Emma's personal belongings, her locket, to complete the ritual of remembrance and closure. We scoured the library's archives once more, searching through old inventories and personal effects left behind by former staff. Hours passed in frustration until finally, tucked away in a forgotten drawer, we found a small, silver locket, its surface engraved with delicate patterns. We returned to the storage room, placing the locket at the center of the candle circle. "This is yours, Emma," I said gently, hoping to convey our sincerity. As I spoke, the air grew warmer, the oppressive energy lifting as the candles burned steadily. Emma's apparition smiled, a serene expression that had been absent for so long. "Thank you," she whispered, her form beginning to fade. "Now, I can rest." With those final words, Emma vanished, leaving behind a room filled with an overwhelming sense of peace. The disturbances ceased, the storage room returning to its tranquil state. Sarah and I stood in silence, the magnitude of what we had accomplished settling over us like a comforting blanket. In the days that followed, the library returned to its usual quietude, the haunting presence of room 309 a distant memory. Guests and staff alike felt a sense of relief, the lingering fear replaced by a newfound respect for the library's history and the spirits that once walked its halls. Emma Thompson's story became a poignant reminder of the importance of remembrance and the healing power of empathy. Years have passed since that transformative night, but the lessons learned remain etched in my heart. The Oxfordshire Public Library stands as a sanctuary of knowledge and history, the shelves filled with stories waiting to be discovered. And sometimes, when the wind rustles through the stacks and the night is particularly still, I catch a faint echo of a librarian's laughter, a gentle reminder that some spirits linger not out of malice, but out of a longing to be remembered and understood. Story number 3. Whispers from Room 309. I've always found solace in the quiet hours of the night, the bustling city of New York fading into a distant hum as I settled into my post as the night receptionist at the Grand Meridian Hotel. The lobby, adorned with elegant chandeliers and plush seating, stood as a beacon of luxury amidst the urban chaos. My shifts were typically uneventful, handling check-ins, managing phone calls, and ensuring the safety of the premises. Yet, there was an unspoken understanding among the night staff. The night held its own secrets, whispers that danced just beyond the reach of our consciousness. It was a chilly October evening in 2019 when the first call came through. The voice on the other end was faint, trembling slightly. "Hello, this is room 309. Could you please send some extra towels?" "Thank you." I glanced at the reservation system. Room 309 was listed as vacant. But not entirely unheard of. Guests sometimes extended their stays or had late checkouts that weren't immediately updated. "Of course, I'll have them sent right away," I replied, trying to mask the unease creeping up my spine. I placed a request with housekeeping and decided to check the room personally, a standard procedure for such anomalies. Walking down the dimly lit hallway, the silence was almost palpable, broken only by the distant sounds of the city below. As I approached room 309, a shiver ran down my spine. The door was slightly ajar, the interior cloaked in shadows. I paused, listening intently. A soft, barely audible whisper seemed to emanate from within, making my heart race. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open fully and stepped inside. The room was impeccably clean, every surface gleaming under the soft glow of the overhead light. Yet, the air felt heavy, thick with an unspoken tension. I called out, "Hello, room 309? I'm here to deliver your extra towels." My voice echoed unnervingly in the empty space. Silence answered me, but the feeling of being watched intensified. I scanned the room, noticing a faint outline near the far wall, a shadowy figure that seemed to dissolve whenever I tried to focus on it. My pulse quickened as I decided to leave the room. Closing the door behind me, I alerted security, Detective Ramirez, who arrived moments later, his expression mirroring my own unease. "We need to check this out," I whispered, feeling a cold sweat break out across my back. Ramirez nodded, and together we returned to room 309. The door was closed this time, but the whispers had grown louder, more insistent. "Help me! Help me!" They echoed through the hallway, sending chills down our spines. He unlocked the door, and we stepped inside once more. The room was as empty as before, but the atmosphere had shifted, oppressive and sorrowful. Ramirez approached the bed, shining his flashlight around the room. "There's nothing here," he muttered, though his eyes darted nervously around. As we left, Ramirez voiced what we both felt. "This feels wrong, like something unfinished." Over the next few weeks, similar calls from room 309 became a haunting routine. Each time, the room was empty, yet the whispers persisted, growing in intensity. Guests reported hearing strange noises emanating from the room, and a few even refused to stay there, citing an inexplicable sense of dread. Determined to uncover the truth, Ramirez and I delved into the hotel's archives. We discovered that years ago, Room 309 had been occupied by a young woman named Emily Hartley. Her stay had been cut short tragically when she was found lifeless in the bathroom. The official cause of death listed as a heart attack. However, whispers of foul play and unexplained circumstances had lingered, fueling rumors of a restless spirit bound to the room. One particularly stormy night, as lightning illuminated the sky and rain pelted the windows, the disturbances reached a crescendo. The whispers morphed into desperate pleas. "Help me find me." The temperature in the lobby dropped sharply, our breaths visible in the frigid air. Ramirez and I exchanged a grim look, knowing that this was no longer just a series of inexplicable events but a cry for help from beyond. "We need to do something," Ramirez stated, his voice steady despite the chaos around us. He suggested conducting a cleansing ritual, a combination of traditional methods and our own devised techniques to appease whatever spirit was haunting room 309. We gathered candles, holy water, and personal items belonging to Emily, determined to bring peace to her restless soul. As midnight approached, we prepared the room, arranging the candles in a circle and placing the items at the center. The air was thick with anticipation, the shadows in the room seeming to pulse with a life of their own. Ramirez began the chant, his voice resonating through the room, while I sprinkled holy water around the perimeter. The atmosphere grew electric, the candles flickering violently as the whispers intensified into a cacophony of anguished cries. The shadowy figure materialized before us, her form more distinct yet still ethereal. Her eyes, filled with sorrow and pain, met ours, and a piercing silence fell over the room. "Emily, we're here to help you," I called out, my voice wavering but resolute. Tears welled in her spectral eyes as she reached out a hand, her touch cold yet filled with longing. "Find my locket. It holds my memories," she whispered, her voice a blend of hope and despair. Ramirez and I exchanged determined glances. "We'll find it for you," Ramirez promised, stepping forward. With renewed purpose, we scoured the hotel's storage rooms, reviewing old maintenance logs and guest records, piecing together Emily's last moments. It was revealed that Emily had been a quiet, introspective woman who had recently suffered the loss of her fiancé. The night she died, she had mentioned feeling a presence watching her, a shadow that never left her side. Our search led us to a forgotten storage closet, hidden behind stacks of unused linens and cleaning supplies. There, buried beneath layers of dust, we found a delicate silver locket, its surface engraved with intricate patterns. As I held it up, the room seemed to exhale, the oppressive weight lifting slightly. We returned to room 309, placing the locket on the bed alongside the other items. "This is yours, Emily," I said softly. The air grew warmer, the whispers subsiding into a peaceful silence. Emily's apparition stood before us, her expression one of profound gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her form beginning to fade. "Now, I can rest." As the last traces of her spirit dissolved into the air, the room returned to its tranquil state. The candles burned steadily, their light no longer wavering. Ramirez and I stood in silence, the magnitude of what we had just witnessed settling in. In the days that followed, the disturbances in room 309 ceased entirely. Guests reported no further strange noises, and the room was once again available for occupancy without fear. The experience had not only brought peace to a restless spirit but had also deepened the bond between Ramirez and me, our shared encounter forging a friendship built on trust and mutual respect. Reflecting on that night, I realized that some stories aren't just about the supernatural. They're about the unresolved pain and the longing for closure that transcends death. Emily's spirit had reached out, her whispers a testament to the enduring power of memory and the compassion that bridges the gap between the living and the dead. Years have passed since the haunting of room 309, but the lessons learned remain etched in my heart. The Grand Meridian Hotel continues to thrive, its halls filled with laughter and life. But sometimes, When the night is particularly still and the shadows stretch long across the floors, I catch a faint echo of a grateful whisper, a reminder that some spirits linger not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to be remembered and understood. And as I continue my shifts, ensuring the safety and comfort of every guest, I carry with me the memory of Emily Hartley and the night when the whispers from room 309 became a story of compassion and redemption. A story that reminds us all that even in the darkest of nights, a single act of kindness can light the way to peace. Story number 4. Whispers behind the shelves. I've always found solace in the quiet hours of the night, the world reduced to shadows and silence. Working the night shift at Sakura Mart, a small convenience store nestled in the heart of Tokyo's bustling suburbs, suited my need for solitude. The steady hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional rustle of midnight shoppers were my companions as I manned the cash register, stocking shelves, and ensuring the store remained secure until dawn. It was a particularly cold December night in 2017 when the first incident occurred. The wind howled outside, and snowflakes danced through the streets, their delicate patterns visible through the large front windows. The store was mostly empty, save for a few late-night customers and myself. As I went about my duties, I began to hear it, a soft, distant laughter echoing from the back of the store, near the freezer section. At first, I dismissed it as the wind or perhaps the distant sounds of the city infiltrating the store's calm. But the laughter persisted, growing slightly louder each night, always around the same time, 2 a.m. It was a light, almost childlike giggle, devoid of malice but undeniably eerie in its repetition. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to investigate, grabbing my flashlight and making my way toward the source of the sound. The store was dimly lit, the aisles stretching out before me like endless corridors. The freezer section stood at the far end, its heavy doors reflecting the pale light from above. As I approached, the laughter grew clearer, more distinct, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I shone my flashlight into the freezer, the beam cutting through the darkness. To my surprise, I saw a small, shadowy figure darting between the shelves, its movements quick and almost playful. My heart raced as I stepped closer, calling out softly, "Hello? Is someone there?" The figure froze, standing still for a moment before bolting toward a corner of the freezer. I followed, the soft footsteps of my own movements amplified in the empty store. As I turned the corner, my flashlight caught a glimpse of a young girl standing silently, her back to me. She was dressed in a simple white dress, her hair cascading down her shoulders in soft waves. Her presence was both beautiful and haunting, an ethereal figure seemingly out of place in the stark, utilitarian environment of the store. "Are you okay?" I asked, taking another step forward. She didn't respond, her gaze fixed on something unseen in the distance. I reached out a hand, but before I could make contact, she vanished, disappearing into thin air as if swallowed by the darkness. I stood there, bewildered and shaken, the laughter fading away as abruptly as it had appeared. The next day, I confided in my colleague, Yuki, about the encounter. She listened intently, her expression a mixture of concern and disbelief. "You know, there have been rumors about this store," she said quietly. "They say that years ago, a young girl named Hannah got trapped in the freezer during a severe storm. No one ever found her, and the store was closed for a while. They never officially solved the case. But some say her spirit still lingers here." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Stories like that were meant to be urban legends, myths told to scare children or keep people away from certain places. But the encounter was real, and the evidence was undeniable. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the store's history, researching old news articles and speaking with longtime residents of the neighborhood. The story of Hannah was heartbreaking, a tragic accident that had left the community in mourning. Hannah had been a bright, cheerful girl, loved by everyone who knew her. The storm that fateful night had been relentless, and the store's freezer doors had been compromised, leading to Hannah's untimely death. Armed with this knowledge, I felt a responsibility to honor her memory and perhaps help her find peace. I decided to visit Hannah's family, hoping to offer my condolences and learn more about her life. Her parents, now elderly, welcomed me with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. They shared stories of Hannah's laughter, her playful nature, and the nights they spent worrying during the storm that took her away. "We never knew why she was in the store that night," her father explained, his voice trembling. "She was supposed to meet us after school, but she never came home." Their grief was palpable, and I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of empathy. I promised to do everything I could to help uncover the truth and bring closure to Hannah's restless spirit. Returning to the store, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. That night, I returned to Sakura Mart armed with a small shrine, candles, flowers, and a photograph of Hannah provided by her family. I placed the items near the freezer, a silent offering to honor her memory. As midnight approached, the atmosphere in the store grew heavy with anticipation. The wind outside howled, and the rain pounded against the windows, mimicking the storm that had taken Hannah's life. The clock struck 2, and once again, the laughter began, soft and distant, but this time it held a hint of sorrow rather than the playful tone it had before. I stood by the shrine, holding my breath as the soft footsteps echoed through the aisles. The shadowy figure appeared once more, moving toward the freezer with a hesitant grace. This time, however, she didn't vanish upon my approach. Instead, she stood before me, her eyes meeting mine with a depth of longing that spoke volumes. "Hannah," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the storm's rage. "I'm here to help you." Tears welled in my eyes as I reached out again, this time with a heart full of compassion. She didn't move, but her expression softened, the sorrow in her gaze giving way to a fleeting sense of peace. I spoke softly, recounting the stories her family had shared, honoring her memory, and assuring her that she was not forgotten. As the words left my lips, the air grew still, the oppressive weight lifting as if a burden had been lifted from the very walls of Sakura Mart. Hannah's figure began to shimmer, her form becoming more ethereal, the light from the candles reflecting off her translucent body. With a final, peaceful smile, she faded into the light, the store once again silent and serene. The laughter ceased, replaced by a profound sense of calm that filled the space. I knew then that Hannah had found the closure she had been seeking, her spirit finally able to rest in peace. The next morning, as I walked through the store, the cold spots and eerie feelings were gone, replaced by a warm, comforting presence that lingered like a gentle embrace. The experience changed me in ways I couldn't have imagined. It deepened my understanding of the unseen forces that linger in the shadows, the spirits that seek acknowledgement and remembrance. I continued my shifts with a newfound respect for the stories that breathe life into the places we pass by. Stories that remind us of the fragility of life and the enduring power of compassion. Years have passed since that transformative night, but the memory of Hannah and the whispers in the freezer remain vivid in my mind. Sakura Mart stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the bonds that connect us beyond the realm of the living. And sometimes, when the storm winds howling outside mimic the nights of old, I catch a faint echo of a child's laughter, a reminder that some spirits never truly leave, their stories forever intertwined with our own. Story number 5. Shadows in the surveillance. I've always taken pride in my job as a night security guard at the towering skyscraper in downtown Chicago. The city's heartbeat echoed through the glass and steel of the building, a constant reminder of the life that thrived outside my solitary post. My shifts were usually uneventful, monitoring cameras, ensuring the building's safety, and occasionally dealing with late-night maintenance crews. But that winter night in December 2019 was different. It was a night that blurred the lines between reality and the supernatural, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about the shadows that linger in the corners of our lives. The night started like any other, The building stood silent against the biting cold. Its lights dimmed to conserve energy during the early hours. I settled into the security office, a small room equipped with multiple monitors displaying various parts of the building. The hum of the surveillance system was a comforting presence, a steady rhythm that lulled me into a state of semi-consciousness as I glanced occasionally at the screens. Around 2 a.m., during my routine check, something caught my eye on the camera monitoring the central elevator. There, standing motionless inside the elevator car, was a shadowy figure, tall and indistinct. The person didn't move, didn't press any buttons, just stood there, staring into the corner of the elevator. At first, I thought it was a glitch, perhaps a reflection or a trick of the lighting. But as I watched, the figure remained unchanged, his presence unnervingly still. "Hello," I called out, my voice betraying a hint of nervousness. There was no response, just the faint hum of the elevator machinery. I leaned closer to the monitor, trying to get a better look. The figure's outline became slightly clearer, revealing a tall man dressed in a long, dark coat. His face was obscured by shadows, but his posture was rigid, almost unnatural. Deciding to investigate, I grabbed my flashlight and made my way to the elevator lobby. The corridors were eerily quiet, the only sound my footsteps echoing off the marble floors. As I approached the elevator, the doors stood wide open, the interior empty. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped inside, the beam of my flashlight sweeping across the barren space. Nothing. The doors closed automatically, leaving me alone in the darkness. Confused and unnerved, I exited the elevator and returned to the security office, my mind racing with questions. When I glanced back at the monitor, there he was again, the same figure standing in the elevator. Only now, he was moving, slowly walking towards the back of the elevator, his form becoming more defined with each passing second. I watched in disbelief as he reached the corner, turning his head to face the camera directly. His eyes, or what should have been his eyes, were glowing a deep, unsettling red, piercing through the darkness with an intensity that made my blood run cold. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice barely steady. The figure didn't respond, merely staring back at me with those haunting eyes. Suddenly, the camera feed went black, the screen flickering before returning to normal. I blinked, trying to process what I had just seen. Was it a hallucination, a trick of the light, or something far more sinister? Determined to get to the bottom of it, I decided to perform a more thorough investigation. I reviewed the footage from previous nights, searching for any signs of the mysterious figure. To my horror, he appeared intermittently over the past week, always at the same time, always in the same elevator. No one else seemed to notice him. No reports of unusual activity, just the eerie, unexplained presence on my screens. I reached out to my supervisor, Detective Laura Mitchell, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for handling the unexplainable. She listened intently as I recounted my experiences, her expression shifting from skepticism to concern. "Let's take a look together," she suggested, her voice calm and reassuring. We sat side by side in the security office, scrutinizing the footage frame by frame. Each appearance of the figure grew more menacing, his presence more oppressive. Detective Mitchell's eyes narrowed as she leaned in closer to the screen. "Have you ever heard of the elevator ghost?" she asked, a note of curiosity in her voice. I shook my head, unfamiliar with the term. She continued, explaining a local urban legend about a spirit that haunted the elevators of old buildings in Chicago. A man who had died tragically in a fall, his restless spirit forever trapped in the machinery that had claimed his life. "That might be what you're seeing," she concluded. "But legends are just that, stories. Let's see if we can find any truth to it." Determined to uncover the reality behind the legend, we delved into the building's history, poring over old records and speaking with longtime residents. What we discovered was a tragic story of a man named Thomas Weller, a maintenance worker who had died in an elevator accident decades ago. His body was never recovered, and rumors of his ghostly presence had persisted, whispered among the maintenance crews and security staff. As we pieced together the fragments of his life and untimely death, the encounters with the elevator ghost took on a new significance. It wasn't just a ghost story. It was a manifestation of unresolved sorrow and lingering resentment, a spirit bound to the place where his life had been abruptly taken. One night, determined to capture definitive proof, we set up additional cameras and motion sensors in the elevator and surrounding areas. The anticipation was palpable, the air thick with a sense of impending revelation. As midnight approached, the atmosphere in the office grew tense, the storm outside mirroring the turmoil within. At exactly 2 a.m., the familiar knocking began, the rhythmic sound echoing through the security office. I glanced at the monitors, my heart racing as the figure appeared once more in the elevator. This time, he wasn't just standing, he was reaching out, his hand extending towards the camera, his red eyes burning with a desperate plea. "Help me," I whispered, unable to tear my eyes away from the screen. Detective Mitchell reached out, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We need to communicate with him," she stated firmly. "Maybe he's trying to tell us something." Taking a deep breath, I approached the elevator, the chill of the night air biting at my skin. As I stood before the doors, I called out softly, "Thomas, can you hear me? I'm here to help." The temperature dropped further, my breath visible in the cold air as the door slowly opened. Stepping inside, the elevator felt different, charged with an eerie energy that made my skin crawl. The figure stood in the corner, his red eyes fixed on me, his presence both terrifying and sorrowful. "Thomas," I repeated, my voice steadier this time. "I want to help you find peace." The air grew heavy, the silence stretching out before him. Then, with a suddenness that made me jump, he began to speak, not with words, but through a series of visions that flashed before my eyes. I saw flashes of his life working diligently, his friendship with colleagues, the fateful night of the accident, and the despair that followed his untimely death. Tears welled up in my eyes as the weight of his sorrow settled upon me. "I'm sorry," I whispered, feeling the depth of his pain. "I'll make sure your story is told." As if responding to my promise, the room began to shimmer, the oppressive energy lifting as his figure started to fade. His eyes, once filled with anguish, now held a glimmer of gratitude. "Thank you," the vision conveyed, and with a final, ethereal whisper, he disappeared, leaving behind a sense of peace that hadn't been present for decades. The morning light streamed through the windows, dispelling the remnants of the night's horrors. Detective Mitchell and I sat in silence, the weight of what we had experienced settling over us. We knew that Thomas Weller had finally found the closure he had been denied, his spirit released from the bonds of his tragic fate. In the days that followed, the encounters with the elevator ghost ceased entirely. The building seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The oppressive atmosphere lifted as if a dark cloud had been dispersed. Our efforts to honor Thomas's memory had not only freed him but also brought a sense of peace to the building and its inhabitants. Reflecting on that night, I realized that some spirits linger not out of malice, but out of a desperate need for recognition and closure. Thomas Weller wasn't a malevolent entity. He was a lost soul seeking understanding and peace. Our compassion and determination had bridged the gap between the living and the dead, allowing him to move on and finally rest. Years have passed since that harrowing night, but the lessons learned remain etched in my mind. The shadows of the past can linger, but with empathy and respect, even the most restless spirits can find peace. As I continue my patrols through the bustling streets of Chicago, I carry with me the memory of Thomas Weller and the night when the lines between reality and the supernatural blurred, reminding me of the enduring power of compassion to heal even the deepest wounds. And sometimes, when the night is particularly still and the wind whispers through the corridors, I catch a faint echo of a grateful whisper, a ghostly thank you, a reminder that some stories never truly end. but instead find their peace through the hearts and minds of those who listen.